Well, it was a collaborative effort with a gentleman named Joshua Rossi, who was very big in the Bitcoin scene in the early days. And he came with the idea of, we don't know what the status of Bitcoin is. People forget that it wasn't until November of 2013 that the US government explicitly said being a Bitcoiner wasn't a crime. Like, people didn't know like how cypherpunk this space was and whether or not just being in it meant that you were doing something wrong. And you would deposit money in a bank account, and Chase would close your account just for even sending money to BitInstant or to Coinbase, or even looking at them the wrong way and using the word Bitcoin. We had friends who would talk to bank managers or bank owners about their Bitcoin startup, and the next day have their personal account and their spouse's personal account closed at the bank. So no one knew what the status of this space was going to be before November of 2013. And there was this idea in the community in early 2013, in February and March, that was, hey, people buy and sell things all the time. In fact, the Buttonwood agreement was under a tree where they'd sell and buy stocks. So Josh said, why don't we have a new Buttonwood agreement? Why don't we, he came to one of the meetups here in New York, and we were talking about it as a community. And the whole goal of it was no one started it, the community started it. And we said, hey guys, I would propose if I showed up on Monday at 5 o'clock in Union Square, would any of you show up? And then we said yes. And there was some debate about what we would call it. And then a friend of mine, Kirill Grove, said, well, Union Square is called that because the unions would go there and protest and disrupt society that way. What if our gathering becomes so prominent in Union Square that in the future they'll rename it Satoshi's Square? Because that's where you go to buy and sell Bitcoin. So he said, brilliant. And I like alliteration. We got Satoshi Squares. And then what proceeded was, I believe for about over a year and a half, was just the disseminated knowledge in New York that if you went to Union Square under the Lincoln statue at 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, there'd be people buying and selling Bitcoin. And then in the winters, we went to the Whole Foods because they had a common area. End of 2013, beginning of 2014, the Bitcoin Center came around with Nick Spanos. And he became the official home of the OTC tradings. So it went to an entirely different level of spectacle and participation and volume sort of when Nick started doing it. I would think maybe 100, 200 people. Those Satoshi Squares got pretty crazy. But the funny thing about the time and place that we were at is in 2013, that was when Occupy was a very, very big force in New York. So while we didn't know what the interpretation by the federal government was what we were doing, the thing that we wanted most was police protection. So Union Square, back during the Occupy days, had about 30 or 40 cops there at all time. So when we were talking about not being able to trust people in this space and not knowing anybody, we're like, look, if there are 5 or 6 of us together, that's safer than just being alone. And then if we do it in the middle of Union Square, there are 40 cops around us. Nothing's gonna go wrong. So it was this weird dichotomy of both not understanding if a bank would let us touch it, but understanding that we need to go in the safest place that we could, both as a group and then also with the police around, because no one wants to get stabbed. No one wants to be that guy, right? In fact, there would be people who would come and be like, yeah, I'm not comfortable, buying Bitcoin in public. And we're like, why? They're like, just come with me to this private area that I have you alone. And we're like, no, we're doing it here. We're not doing it at all. And, the whole point of the space is, it's about trust. It's about the lack of it and the presence of it. And once you establish a relationship with someone, you have an OTC relationship. Regardless of what happens, you can always buy or sell from that person. So the idea was, why don't we come together, have this be the area where people who don't know each other at all could at least feel safe in doing transactions. And then over time, you establish a web of trust in each major city. And I believe by the end of 2014, there are about a dozen or 2 dozen OTC exchanges that would call themselves Satoshi Squares or Buttonwood projects or this or that, which was just the concept of let's just meet and have an open square. I'll say people bought and sold on their own behalf, and I most certainly wasn't the organizer of it, and I don't know what volumes may have occurred, and that was the beauty of it. I do know that a lot of the relationships that were created from Satoshi Square actually ended up becoming business relationships. So there are companies in New York where the co-founders first met each other because they would regularly trade against one another in Satoshi Square. You know, once you could establish trust with someone, you could then take it offline and then engage in larger transactions. So the purpose of Satoshi Square wasn't, you know, let's be the order book. It was, let's create a mechanism to onboard trust in this space in a way that doesn't exist. And it achieved that. And I think that to some extent we don't need it as much as we did because of the Coinbases of the world and the easier ways in which to get it. But there's nothing stopping anyone from just throwing it out there. Hey, I'm going to meet at the park under the, what was it? I think we had the 5-year anniversary during Consensus. Actually, we did a Satoshi Square, and we just had like 5 or 6 of the original guys just show up, and we hung out. And like, it was great. There's nothing. That's the beauty of it. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing it. One of my favorite moments was I was doing a meetup with a couple of other guys, and during the meetup, Mt. Gox turned itself off when Bitcoin was at 260. There was no price discovery, and no one knew what was going on. And basically everyone at the meetup said, okay, we're not leaving until Gox comes back online. And then we all bet $1 on what we thought the price would be when it came back online. That was a very fun moment. Actually, the meetups that I kicked off, so there were a couple of meetups before me, but they were one-off. And then I started something called Bitcoin NYC with a couple of other guys. And then as an offshoot from that became BitDevs NYC, which is another phenomenal group. And the two of us for a good couple of years constituted the meetup community in New York and sort of the bed for that. And the first one was at a Starbucks coffee shop and was promoted through Facebook. And then, I mean, we called them meetups for a reason. I then transitioned it to Meetup, and the response rate was great. And Meetup was a very integral, the actual website, it's a very integral part of getting the community together, getting announcements out, and just getting people to show up. I was using Facebook events before then, and it didn't at all get the same. I think the response rate of outcome from I say I'm going to go to show up is substantively lower in my experience, and Meetup just has. Facebook has the normies, and Meetup has my people. So when I needed to find my people, I got a lot better response from Meetup than I did other methods of promotion. And when I had started the Meetup, it was really a, bust your butt, pound the pavement, go to all the other events, promote it like no one's business. But after a certain point, it really did sort of feed in on itself and start having organic growth, which is where it became a really awesome thing. So Meetup as a tool was always a fantastic way to get the word out. But I do miss those days. I actually, I miss the days where just wearing a Bitcoin t-shirt alone meant that if someone knew what that was, you knew you could have 4 or 5 hours of conversation with them. I'm someone who wears an insane number of Bitcoin t-shirts, and I've become more and more esoteric with the type of Bitcoin shirts I wear because I need to still self-select for the blockchainy weirdos and not the normies, and Bitcoin's become too normal to the space. I have a lot of friends who describe a good way to know how Bitcoin's going mainstream is the period in which people stop having Bitcoin t-shirts on their dating profiles. Because that time happened last year. It was like, oh God, no, this is attracting the wrong kind of person. I have to take it off my profile now. I don't think that that energy and belief is gone. I just think it's just entirely overcrowded by those who don't encapsulate that, and that's sort of the bad side of mainstreaming. But everyone wants this thing to mainstream, and that's what that is.